Hello, and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today I'm going to talk about some of the research I've been doing, as well as answer some of your questions from the show. It's good to be here today. I see, wow, we've already got a lot of comments. It's good to see James going to be answering one of your questions, as well as everybody else in the chat. Got a lot to talk about today. And one of the things I wanted to touch base about is some of the LoRa experimentation I've been doing. So I experienced a mysterious limit to the ability to LoRa devices to transmit over about a mile. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on, but I've got a little bit of a suspicion. So I'm going to show off a post that I made earlier on Twitter. One of the gadgets I've created recently was a CircuitPython-based GPS-enabled LoRa signal tester. So I had been working with my friend Davis on testing the range to LoRa and seeing if we could build some of these DIY devices and get the incredible range that people were talking about with this technology. And in downtown Los Angeles, we got about a mile, which was pretty impressive given there's all the interference and everything. But we tested this out in the country and we got about the same limit. Now, testing this was also, let's just say, not fun. I was driving a car at night, and the way we set this up originally was that it triggered a really bright flash. So I would be able to press the button and look in the distance for a flash kind of going back to me. As I was trying to increase the range, I was driving my car, and also the neopixels on the device that let me know when it transmitted were blinding, and I really didn't like that. So I had to press the button manually. I realized that maybe this wasn't the best way of getting a signal strength because I also had to put down a like a pin on Google Maps in order to figure out where I was when I was sending the transmission. So I was like, I can do this better. I'm going to spend a day over the weekend working on this and figure out not only why is LoRa not transmitting as far as it should, but also how can I perform this task a little bit easier. So this is what I did. I took a, let's see if, oh yes, I have it right here. I took one of these great new LoRa modules that I have been working on, and I added a GPS unit. So the point there is that as I drive, this thing can automatically transmit its GPS location. And on the other end, I decided to have it text me on Signal as soon as it got a response. So it looks something like this. As I drove, every 10 seconds, this would get its GPS coordinates, transmit, and then if it was received, the receiver would actually send me a message on Signal with my GPS location at the time, and then also the signal strengths. So that allowed me to drive around and test out the signal a lot more easily. And it also prevented me from almost getting in a car accident. So this was a cool little thing I worked on over the weekend. I'm going to be releasing the CircuitPython code if you need to test anything from how different antennas affect LoRa transmission all the way to some of the crazy stuff that I was trying to do. Now, what I found to be a little bit interesting is there's only one variable in CircuitPython, the language I was using to write this, that doesn't work. So in CircuitPython, which is a derivative of Python, when you set up the radio, there's a number of things that you can do. And I think I have my CircuitPython up still. And this is, of course, for a lot of the nerds who care about radio stuff. But this is how I set up my radio in CircuitPython. It's really easy. There's only a couple lines, and I've maximized all the different settings that let me transmit over a long distance. The coding rate, the bandwidth. I've basically done a lot of stuff to make sure that transmissions can be received really far. And still, I didn't get that great of a result. So there's one last thing that I can tweak in order to try to make this transmit even further. And looking at the library, that is called the spreading factor. So the spreading factor indicates how much of the allowable bandwidth is able to be taken up by the transmission. And that is something that allows us to potentially be received over a lot longer of a distance. Here we go. So this is the spreading factor. So I tried to learn how to use this, and I found that anytime I set a spreading factor, no matter what it was, it would cause the radios to be unable to hear each other. Now, there's a lot of theories as to why this is happening. Some people on, I think, Stack Overflow thought that it was because it takes so long to transmit this. It can take up to several seconds that the receiver was just timing out and wasn't able to actually detect it. I'm not really sure, but by default, this just doesn't work with CircuitPython. So it's interesting that one of the most important things for being heard over a very long distance, the spreading factor, which is also one of the things that LoRa is known for, is actually not very accessible by default. So I'm going to try to of this experiment, I have gotten range of, this was in kilometers, but 200 kilometers with a different LoRa module that was not that much of a different setup. So I'm a little confused by this mysterious like 1 mile range, and I think that the property of spreading factor might end up changing that. So that's what I was working on this weekend, creating an automated tester and trying to break through on this mystery of why I've only been able to get a mile of range even when I have direct line of sight. Now, some of you may be asking, how do you know if you have direct line of sight? Well, I'm glad you asked. One of the tools that I recently got to know is, hey, what's that? And RF line of sight. So when planning for some of these experiments where I need to have direct line of sight, I'm able to use some of these free tools to look at whether or not a radio can hear another radio, whether depending on the geography of a specific area. So let's say I have something over here, and I want to see if radio A and radio B can communicate with each other. Well, this website allows you to generate an elevation map, and I can say definitively no. It absolutely cannot communicate with that other radio. So while getting used to some of these cool LoRa technologies, I do have to keep line of sight in mind. And if I want to make sure that I'm setting my stuff up in a way that other sites can receive it, then it certainly helps to know whether or not there's some sort of natural formation that is causing there to be a block. Now, in this case, if I wanted to kind of move around and find like a location that does support a really long distance of transmission, I'll probably have to move over here because I'm in the middle of North Dakota. I can identify spots that are really good for me to run my experiment. So if you're into radio stuff, if you are curious as to why a certain receiver maybe isn't getting reception, I have to recommend this as a cool way of figuring out whether something is even worth trying. Because a lot of times I have found that I'll come up with an idea and then find out that nope, it actually is not possible for one radio signal to be received by another, just as a result of the terrain in a certain area. So super useful. I found this to be great for any sort of radio experiments. Man, North Dakota is a tough case. It really seems like it's difficult to find an area where you can get clear reception. But you can also do things like indicate the height of the antenna. So if you wanted to say, oh, it's over a certain elevation on the receiver side, then maybe that would allow you to get some reception. I feel bad for people that live in North Dakota. What's the, here. I just want to see the radio signal go through once. It just kind of seems unlucky. Okay, very flat. I guess that's good. So yeah, so anyway, don't want to spend too much time on this tool, but often I go through things that I'm using, and for figuring out why some of my radio stuff wasn't working, this was a very useful tool. All right, some other things I wanted to talk about today. Let's see. So I have a number of comments from the YouTube channel that I don't usually get to, and I wanted to actually bring them up and talk a little bit about them. Some of them are comments, some of them are questions, but here's one from the channel, and this was, I've been using third-party apps to find AirTags for about 2 years now. It's good that now your phone alerts people. So this was a conversation we had before where AirTags were not possible to detect on Android device unless you installed an application and then specifically ran a scan. And this couldn't really run in the background. It was something you had to actively be scanning for. So really, if you weren't looking in that particular moment, it might be possible to completely miss an AirTag being placed on like your vehicle or something like that. So this was a way that I think a lot of AirTags went unnoticed until relatively recently, like 2 years after this became possible, it actually became integrated into the operating system of various, basically of various Android devices. So that means it's now possible for people to detect AirTag stalking, but I really have to say it took such a long time for this to happen that if you were an Android user, you were really vulnerable to this sort of AirTag stalking until about last month. All right. Next up, we have, oh, it just opens another one. Okay. It's been a while since we went through these ones. So this is from James. Hello, James. And this is talking about the Snowflake breach. I've heard some interesting takes on this. Like the data stored in services like Snowflake aren't typically critical data. It's often analytics or stale data. So the point here is that if people don't think the data is critical, perhaps they didn't focus on securing it in the right way, they would with other data. Old data no longer used accounts might have access to a FA might not be used, and configurations might not be scrutinized, which is a perfect target for credential stuffing. And absolutely, that's really the concern with a lot of these breaches is even if the data is considered relatively like non-critical, if it does connect to other services, or if it connects to old accounts that might have high privileges or might not use 2FA, these kind of left behind zombie accounts are something that can absolutely come back to bite you. So yeah, there's not just the concern of the data being super relevant. It's also what the data is connected to. That's a big concern for a lot of these cloud breaches. All right, next up. This one is just taking on how many tabs I have. It just says, geez, Kody, have a lot of tabs open? Take it easy. Yeah, I agree. And I also just realized I could just be previewing these. There's no need for all of that. Yeah, no, there's a lot of news we cover every week. I'm not as bad as our former production manager, Michael, who had seemingly infinite tabs open, like to the point that it would max out. But yes, I could definitely stand to close the tabs a little bit, especially on this computer. Often I have people discover our Easter eggs way later. So this was on a video we published like years ago. Somebody finally found like the funny Wi-Fi name we connected to. I'm not going to tell you guys what video it is, but it is funny that it took literally 2 years for somebody to notice the goofy name of the Wi-Fi network we were connecting to. So this was an interesting take. So this was under the video we did talking about North Koreans working surreptitiously in the United States to support their nuclear program. And this comment says that they understand what it's like to work under sanctions or being in a country that has sanctions, and it makes it really hard for people to have access to money to buy things like medication. They say also, I don't know anything about the nuclear program, but obviously like people who are trying to bypass sanctions and help people out are trying to help people that maybe don't have as many opportunities. But in this case, the fact that it was a bunch of North Koreans certainly did not serve the person who was helping them out, especially because I think James pointed out here, it looked like she was even doing taxes for them, which was a whole kind of new degree of cooperation with a entity that has explicitly been banned from those roles in the United States. All right, so this is a good one. Hello, how do you hack a car? So there's a lot of ways of hacking a car, and this one I think deserves a response, mostly because this has become a lot easier. So hacking a car used to be like having to figure out like the specifics of a vehicle, like, you know, like finding out what software it's running, figuring out how to maybe unlock it. And there's people who steal cars, and they will typically do it by relaying a key fob or taking advantage of the like keyless entry or other things where you don't need to actually plug the key in order to start the car. It just has to be close enough to indicate that it's okay to start the vehicle, and then just drive off with it. But typically, most of the car hacking I see nowadays is done through the built-in systems in the car. So that means that it's relatively easy to find out, for example, by a vehicle's VIN, like what types of information you can pull from the car and maybe even open it, and in some cases drive away. So that's because these telematics that are installed in the vehicle are often installed by default, and they are really difficult to turn off. Like it was pretty recently that somebody went through the process of trying to disable Toyota's information collection, and it really made a huge stink about it when you tried to disable it, and also disabled legitimately useful features like being able to call 911 and tell them your location. So in order to disable this information sharing and all this stuff that often has poorly secured third-party APIs, it's quite a pain for most consumers. So they don't do it. So newer cars can typically be hacked by looking at the APIs that the vehicles interact with and then seeing if there's ways of abusing them. And researchers have found repeatedly that these third-party services like OnStar and others really don't put a lot of effort into the security and of their services. And you can often do things like use the vehicle's VIN number, which is visible from the outside of the car, to potentially unlock the vehicle or do other things, including getting information about where the car is. So that's all very creepy, but car hacking is definitely more web application pen testing than it used to be. So super interesting if you are particularly fascinated with car hacking. You might also be interested in some of the features that are now built into modern cars, super hard to opt out of, and allow an attack surface that might allow you to use some skills you might not have thought would be useful for hacking cars, like, you know, web application pen testing. So anyway, cars are really cool, and there's a lot of interesting stuff around car hacking nowadays. All right. So also, James was asking, I wonder if it's possible for a microcontroller to create a WPA3 access point. So this is a really good question. I wasn't sure. So I spent some time before the stream looking this up. Now we're coming out very soon, I believe, if we haven't already, with a piece on WPA3 and the different ways that you can attack it. I already have a couple of pieces on this, but basically you can do some things like timeout the router so it can't connect anymore. And I wanted to see whether or not it's actually possible on some of these newer microcontrollers to do this. So I took a look at the documentation, which is, pretty decent from Espressif. And I wanted to see if some of these popular microcontrollers could actually do it. And the answer seems to be yes. Support for WPA3 personal. Now, this is for an ESP32S3, I believe. And that's what I'm typically working with right now. I guess I can check it for other devices. Yeah, okay, so even the ESP32S2 supports WPA3 personal. So that's really interesting. There's also some documentation on Arduino, some back and forth on Arduino saying that somebody could not connect to WPA3 with the ESP32S, the ESP32. And then later on, they didn't really get much help. And they just came back and said, oops, it's case sensitive. So it seems as though it will connect to WPA3, and it also seems as though it's possible to create a WPA3 soft access point. So I am going to actually try this. I don't know if this is possible with CircuitPython. I might have to try Arduino, and I've been having some problems. Okay, so here we go. Enterprise only in station mode. That's interesting. So I should have. Yep. Okay, so I don't see anything here that says that it only, for example, supports it in station mode. So this all looks like pretty good news. So to answer your question, James, if you did want to poke around and start experimenting with WPA3 and you wanted to do it without having to buy like a fancy WPA3 router, this seems like a way that you might be able to take a stab at messing with the protocol and maybe be able to break something. So yeah, I'm pretty, yes, DJ Chateau. ESP32 docs are pretty comprehensive, if not very dry. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed by how easy it was to work with this and get an answer almost immediately. So yeah, the only question is whether or not it's easy to do with Arduino, because obviously the documentation for the ESP32 here is via Espressif, and it's an ESP IDF programming guide. So often Arduino will act as a wrapper for this. So it's a pretty good indication that if it is supported in Espressif IDF, and it's been supported for a while, that it will also be supported in Arduino IDE. But you just got to be careful, because every once in a while it might look like it's available, but you may have to then learn Espressif IDF in order to actually use that particular feature. So yeah, just a little bit of warning there. I will have to try it, but as of right now, it looks like, James, that was an excellent question. And yes, it does appear that it is supported. Oh, and also, you're welcome, SAQ. I hope you've enjoyed that we've covered some WPA3 things recently, because I know that was your #1 top comment in the last couple streams. So I wanted to circle back to that and make sure that we did cover at least a little bit of WPA3 stuff, as I can see there is definitely some excitement there around it. So we also have Toorcamp coming up, and let's see, did I have anything else? I think that was most of the, oh wait, no, there are some more questions. Okay, let's go through. So the ethical hacker at RSAC piece that I did definitely got some attention, and it got some pretty funny comments. One of them being, they told me not to run Nmap on the RSAC Open Wi-Fi, so I did it. That is not true. I definitely ran Nmap on the RSAC Open Wi-Fi, and it was pretty well locked down, I have to say. When it comes to these sorts of conferences, like, I don't mind, running a quick scan and it's like seeing what else is connected. Oftentimes that's the way that I validate that I am in fact connected to the conference network, because there's going to be potentially unlimited access points claiming to be the official RSAC Open Wi-Fi network. And as I was telling my coworkers, if I was like a spy and I wanted to try to infect as many computers as possible, I would totally go to RSAC and create like an open Wi-Fi network that matches the one of the conference and see if I could trick any conference goers into downloading and installing something on my rogue network or something like that. So I always do run a couple of my networking tools just to make sure that I am in fact on the right network. Because if I see, like a Wi-Fi pineapple, like sitting at the center of the free network that I just joined with the same name as, the RSA Security Conference Open Wi-Fi, then, perhaps I have some reason to be concerned. But yeah, that was a fun piece to make. And we also just released another one, two truths and an AI. And that is one that was also super fun to make at RSAC. Okay, this is kind of a long one. Let's read it. Here we go. I'm a big fan of your channel and grateful to have learned from you. Is it possible for you to make a video about the ransomware attack on Dr. Motke and his patients? The patients got ransomware as well as the content the hacker group put out of him is very controversial. It's an incredibly interesting topic. No security analysts have covered it. It's wild. Yeah, so I actually did cover this on the news stream a while ago, and it was a pretty crazy case. So let me see if I can find it. I think I pulled it up somewhere. Not there. Here it is. Yeah, this was crazy. All right, so when we talk about ransomware, like oftentimes this will be like a mortgage company or a bank or something like that. But in this case, it was neither of those. This was actually a plastic surgery company that had before and after photos of a lot of the stuff that they've done. And this was including like breast augmentation and other things that are obviously very sensitive. So for people who, are fancy people who pay a lot of money for plastic surgery in Beverly Hills, this is a big deal to suddenly get a data breach notice and be alerted that their information was potentially out there. So we've talked about nefarious threat actors before and how they will try to not only make money from the primary victim, that being the business that they attack, but also secondary victims that are involved in the data breach. Now, this could be as simple as reaching out to the victims and offering them a chance to delete their data from the information that's going to be leaked for a smaller fee than they were charging the original vendor. And often this is kind of a thing where like the threat actor, did a thing, they've now got some heat on them, the company isn't going to pay up, and they're trying to find ways to ratchet up the pressure on the original company that has been breached. In this case, if it seems like that negotiation is going nowhere, then they can create a scenario where it might be so litigious and so many other patients might end up suing that it becomes a different scenario for the company that is involved in the data breach. In this case, the threat actors were particularly ruthless in setting up websites that actually had the personal information and the photos from patients and then had their contact information listed as well. So this is obviously very disturbing, like photos and stuff to be put up, but also linking it with the personal data of victims meant that these people were almost immediately contacted and became involved in either negotiating with the threat actors or suing the doctor that had this information leaked in the first place. So this was a pretty incredible breach in that the threat actors didn't just stop at trying to negotiate with the business. They went after the individual victims in the data breach as well, pretty indiscriminately. So this was notorious. And I was actually surprised to see that this has kind of been scrubbed from the news cycle. And when I looked this breach up, I really didn't see very much in terms of like, on Google News or some of the other news search services I use. I had to specifically look for some other search results. And I found this in the HIPAA journal. So if you're looking for a really interesting case study in like kind of medical like abuse as well as hacking, there was only one other story I can think of that is as bad as this. And it was a medical, I think it was like a therapy practice that was hacked. And the hacker actually went after the patients and threatened to leak all the therapy notes, and then actually went ahead with this in order to pressure the victims further. That threat actor actually got caught, and rightfully so, because that was a super horrible thing to do. So yeah, it looks like this is becoming something that's a bit more common to actually go after the victims, especially when the data involved is very sensitive or could be used in an embarrassing way to create these websites that create additional pressure on people involved in the data breach. Now, naturally, these people all qualified for free credit monitoring, but after having something that traumatizing happen to you, that's probably not going to be very comforting to get, your 5th round of free credit monitoring from whatever breach. It was BetterHelp online therapy. Actually, no. So I'm talking about, this was like I believe in like Norway, or it was like somewhere not in the United States that was involved in a data breach where the hacker actually stole the data and was leaking the patient information. BetterHelp was involved in a different settlement because they were including like tracking pixels, like Facebook and other tracking pixels, when people were entering sensitive information. For example, diagnoses, medications they were taking. This information was all being included in an advertising profile that was being built by these third parties. So BetterHelp recently got in trouble for, basically like including patient information in tracking practices and selling that information to third parties. But as of right now, I'm not aware of any like patient data breach that was used to then specifically target the patients. If I'm wrong, feel free to let me know. Yeah, so sadly, the therapy app that was selling data said HIPAA didn't apply to them because they weren't a real healthcare company. Yeah, I would not be surprised if that was. We're just a matching service that connects like patients to licensed people. We don't have to like adhere to HIPAA because we're just like Uber for healthcare. Yeah, no. We'll see how long that as a standard exists. Okay, yeah. So here is another piece, so another comment on Toorcamp, and I wanted to shout this out as I'm learning more and more about it, and it's something that is really interesting to me. So I have never been to Toorcamp before. I shouted this out on the last stream, and I kind of asked people, hey, if you've been to Toorcamp, can you tell me like what's the deal? Like what's it all about? And I very quickly learned, you guys, that if I show up to Toorcamp and I'm lame, like if I come with lame ideas, if I show up as like a lame vendor or something, it's gonna be bad. Like just because this is something that you bring your best stuff, you really try to engage people, you demonstrate with art, with community projects, and with infrastructure because you're out in the woods, all the things that you're interested in. And having a lot of creative people on my team, like having a lot of opportunities to go there and show off all the cool stuff we've been working on, especially in an environment where, like the only way to communicate might be via like LoRa or some of these other technologies I've been exploring. It's going to be really cool. But yes, I definitely don't want to be lame. It's very important to me not to be lame. And Deviant Olem has been running something called the Open Bar. This is, yes, it is explained on his channel, but basically there's a bunch of alcohol with locks on it, and the locks get progressively harder on these boxes that the alcohol is in. If you want to get to it, you have to figure out how to pick these locks, which means you have to level up your lock picking skill in order to, as you get drunker, theoretically. So it's kind of a funny, game that inhibits you from maybe succeeding the further you go on, which is kind of nice to have a self-limiting game there. But it's one of those things where it's going to be a lot of like art installations and a lot of just influencing people's behavior through providing technology, infrastructure, and games for people to play on the island. So again, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm still frantically planning all the workshops that we're going to be doing, which were recently scheduled. And I'm also really looking forward to Hope. So I haven't shouted out that much because it's not the most recent, the most upcoming workshop, but Hope is also definitely something to check out. We've got a lot of workshops there. It's going to be in New York and Queens. It's in, like 2 months now. So definitely if you're looking for a great workshop if you're looking for some great workshops at a really fun conference on the East Coast, then check out Hope, Hackers on Planet Earth, because it is also going to be really awesome. So yeah, I know that my friends and I are going to be getting a camp together. We're going to be trying to put out some cool Blinky stuff. We're going to be trying to experiment with Meshtastic and radios. And we're also going to be inviting people to come hang out, learn, and hack with microcontrollers while we are there. So if you're going to Toorcamp, please let me know. I want to know some people who are going to be there, and I think it'd be really fun. And I think it is going to be it's going to be lit up like Las Vegas. Yeah, I could. So the only thing that I think is really crazy is like it's kind of off grid, right? So there's a lot of campsites that are not going to have power. They'll have like maybe Wi-Fi, but they're going to have to get their own power. So maintaining the maximum level of blinkiness as well as figuring out how to have power is going to be really interesting. But I have no doubt we will figure out something. All right, so I saw a few talks about Toorcamp and it looked really cool. They ran their own cell phone network one year. Yeah, it's crazy. So ShadyTel apparently rolls out just like regular like phone networks where you can like get a regular corded phone, but also they were running their own cell phone network out there and you could get SIM cards from them. So this is an incredible demonstration of technology in kind of an area with a vacuum of infrastructure. And that's the cool part about it is you can kind of fill that with your own stuff. So my friends and I were looking at all sorts of things we could do, like LoRa pagers, or like having like a sign or a board that has messages people from across the camp can send. There's a lot of cool stuff that we could do that we're looking at doing. But the primary thing seems to be, don't be lame. Like, just don't be lame. Like, if you're lame, then this is not going to be worth it. So one of the things I noted about Toorcamp, there's such a diversity of talks. There's definitely going to be a lot of talks that are eclectic. There's a lot of biohacking talks. And I noticed that, yes, one of the people on our team really likes biohacking and is probably going to be super interested. And then I have been going to the San Juan Islands since I was about 16 years old. They're one of my favorite places in the world, and learning that there was a big hacker camp there kind of seemed like unbelievable to me. I was like, this has to be like a derelict project from years ago, and like no one actually does it anymore. But no, it's actually happening. So yeah, the wide range of talks is going to be exciting. Stupid hackathon, looking forward to that. We've got to capture the flag. I'm looking at maybe doing some fox hunt stuff where we basically like hide microcontrollers in the forest and like people have to track them down by signal. There's multiple parties, it looks like. Yeah, Shady Tells, the telephone service I mentioned. A punk cafe. The bureaucracy apparently is like a near infinite bureaucratic process to become a citizen of this camp, where then you get free beer, which is incredible and gets more complicated every year. Milliways is something that pops up at a lot of the European hacker conferences that I attend. So it's good to see them in another spot, and this time in the United States. And yeah, again, I'm really, really excited for this. I think that it's going to be a lot of interesting and cool ideas, and also a lot of art being shown off here. But I'm going to be teaching about Wi-Fi hacking, USB hacking, doing some soldering classes, and otherwise, it's going to be a relatively light schedule. So we'll have plenty of time to hang out, talk. So if you're going to be there, or if you know anyone who's going to be there, please tell them to come by, say hello, and yeah, check us out. Let's see. Your own cell network. Yeah, you could. Well, yeah, so you can finally get off your own service, at least for the duration of the conference. After that, I don't know if they're going to be able to serve your local area. But yes, it is absolutely so super cool that people can set up their own private infrastructure that kind of mimics public infrastructure, and you can see that it's not just the the big companies that can provide something like that. So having your phone run on like a local cell phone network is pretty cool, and I'm definitely going to try it if it's available this year. But do you guys have any suggestions for what we can do at Toorcamp this year? I'm looking for blinky displays, signs, connected things, stuff where we could give out like LoRa modules and have people control something at our camp. I'm just trying to think of different ways that people could be connected together and kind of affect other things in beautiful and interesting ways. And of course, like blinky art and other stuff is going to be great, but we have pretty limited space for what we can bring, because like we're going to be driving there, and it's a really long drive from where I am to the San Juan Islands. So yeah, like we'll kind of see what ends up coming from it. But already I want to build some art stuff. Already I want to try to have a camp that's impressive enough and interesting enough to have a lot of people come over and hang out with us most of the time, which probably means finding a source for Klub Mata around the Seattle area. So also, if you happen to know where we can buy some of that like hacker mata drink in the Seattle area, that would be much appreciated. Interesting. Someone built a drone with Skyjack on board. Yeah, I have been interested in Skyjack for a while. This is a project by Sammy Camcar that allows you to basically take over other cheap drones that use Wi-Fi. It's really cool because it runs off of a Raspberry Pi Zero, and I kind of want to see if there's still documentation about it up, because I really love this project. Let's see. Yeah, autonomous drone hacking. So this is quite an old project, 2013. And obviously this is not going to work on more modern drones that have implemented some security. Some of these, though, have either default credentials or no Wi-Fi password at all. And that allows you to basically disconnect the legitimate controller and then use a Raspberry Pi Zero to fly the drone away, potentially. So this was one of my favorite projects I've ever seen, honestly. It's really cool to see some of these really cheap drones that use off-the-shelf technology, including Wi-Fi, get hacked in an autonomous way, especially slinging the Raspberry Pi Zero W underneath the drone and using it as an electronics warfare platform was super cool to me. I found this project as I was first getting involved in Nullbyte, and I tried to replicate it, but unfortunately at that point could not afford even a cheap drone to try it against. And by the time that I got more involved in drones, they had been updated to the point that they're no longer using the Wi-Fi standard. So while this probably won't work on a lot of modern drones, it will work on some of the older like Parrot AR drone 2s. And again, the Raspberry Pi was the weapon of choice here. And it just uses some of the standard Linux tooling you would expect for Wi-Fi hacking in order to make this all work. So AirCrack-NG, Node AR drone, really, really cool. And again, like one of my favorite projects. So if you got this working, I would love to see if you wrote anything up from it, because it is an awesome project. So Sammy said that an update apparently is coming, and he did an interview about it a few months ago, and that so many drones are still unprotected. This is something that I feel like our friend Angelina would really be interested in, considering she does a lot of drone hacking stuff. And that was one of the subjects of her talk that she did at the last conference we all attended at Layer 1. So yeah, really interesting to see that some of these drones are definitely still vulnerable. I, again, mostly work with DJI drones, which are secured a little bit better from just casual hacking with just like standard Linux tools and a Wi-Fi radio. But a lot of these older drones like to use 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. It does a pretty good job of this. And if you're controlling it from your phone, then it makes it pretty compatible with most devices. So it's easy for these devices to, just have like a cheap drone that's controlled by your existing phone, or maybe something that just uses a wireless link. So love that project. Super cool. And Kody, make a pen which can be used as a transmitter/receiver, which can work in Morse code. That would be really easy. That would be really, really easy. There's, in fact, I think that pretty much anybody could make that using just like a button and then like a microcontroller. The hard part is just fitting it, like getting it to fit inside a pen, having power, like all the other things aside from the core functionality of just doing that. Because, you know, you could just connect that to Wi-Fi and have it publish it to anywhere. Seems reasonable. James says the article about it is on Hackaday. It's not built yet. It might be possible to build a Stingray with the Raspberry Pi. All right, yeah. So if you're interested in more like self-hosted cell phone tower shenanigans, then you can check out that article on Hackaday. All right, so we've got 10 minutes or so left in the stream. If you got any questions or thoughts on Toorcamp, definitely interested to know if you've seen anything at other hacker conferences that like makes you think is cool. Like for me, going into Noisebridge and seeing the giant screen that they made out of bottles made me immediately want to do that, even though I could tell how much work it was and how tired they were after doing it. It was one of the coolest things that I've seen. So those sorts of art installations, or being able to create something that other people can interact with, definitely seem like a fun idea, especially since we've got like some of our like long range communication stuff up and running. With my little GPS add-on that I created here for measuring LoRa signal strength, it seems like you could also just combine other sensors and other things too, to allow people to take over a sign or do something cool. That being said, I don't know about building a frame for that. That seems like maybe a little harder than I initially think, but I don't know. I'm trying to find some cool things that we could do that would attract people and hopefully be able to be seen for a good distance, all blinky at night. So some other people apparently have been to Noisebridge. I went for the very first time, and Noisebridge is a very old hackerspace compared to most of the hackerspaces I go to, and also quite large. It was incredibly big. And I noticed that, actually, let me see if I can pull up some information on it. So Noisebridge is a 2-story hackerspace, which is crazy to me. It has a lot of space dedicated to kind of non-conventional things. And that includes like a sewing and fabrics area that's way bigger than others I've seen at other hackerspaces. It has a music room, which I've honestly never seen before at a hackerspace, and a lot of other infrastructure that's available for people to use. Upon arriving, there's always someone there who's willing to give you a tour, which was wonderful. And I was able to go back multiple times while I was in San Francisco and really enjoyed each one of my visits. One of the kind of like main things that I enjoyed about the space, and I'm not sure if it's going to be on this, is the giant screen in the main area. And I think, yeah, there it is. Well, okay, that might just be an unrelated giant screen. Oh, yeah, no, that's it. So this giant screen is made out of bottles. It is absolutely huge. And when you go behind it and you kind of see how it was all wired together, you can tell that it took probably months to make this. Like, I don't think I would be able to make something that similar, but this project was absolutely crazy and would require like a good amount of people to do. But that's the kind of project that I've been inspired by. I love to see the sort of things at hackerspaces, and the sheer amount of art at this hackerspace, and the fact that I met a lot of people who are, artists, not necessarily programmers or developers or like, cybersecurity, like hackers, was a really interesting and great mix of people. So I got to meet a lot of people here. I'm still in touch with them, and I plan to be creating more workshops that I will actually do at Noisebridge the next time I'm in town. But yeah, if you haven't been to Noisebridge, I think that you would probably enjoy it, because I definitely did. There's just a lot of really interesting people there and all sorts of people there. So I talked to everybody from people who were like, super chill and laid back and just wanted to make some art, to people who were completely committed to a plan to like overthrow the social order, like based on like a series of whiteboarded objectives. So all sorts of people there. Very, very interesting place to check out. And one of my favorite hacker spaces, alongside Null Space Labs and Hack Manhattan. Ping pong screens are popular too. Yeah, I've also seen this. So frequently, if you can make a big board that has, diffusers and the neopixels, it makes it really easy to make some of these beautiful and vibrant screens that people can interact with. So I'm kind of thinking of something maybe similar, like a diffuser, something like that. My 3D printer is down with a thermal error. I have been unable to print anything on my Prusa for the last like 3 months or so, because I get a thermal error every time I try. So if you've got a Prusa and you know what that's all about, please let me know, because I have tried honestly not that many things. I should just replace the thermistor, but it's a pain, so I haven't. But as a result, I haven't been able to print my own diffusers. So I'm looking for easy things like maybe a ping pong ball diffuser, or I've even seen bins, like just bins kind of like stacked, like use as diffusers. There's all sorts of cool things you can do. And I would love to make something like big and beautiful for this conference, seeing as there's going to be a lot of wonderful people who are attending. So yeah, love that sort of thing. Thermal air is probably the thermistor. I know. I just hate wiring anything on the Prusa. If you have 3D printers, then you probably know the difference between the Ender 3 and the Prusa is that the Ender 3 is like super easy to rip apart. Like everything is just like barely wired together. There's a bunch of hot glue on stuff, like, but generally fixing things is both necessary because they break all the time, and also not that hard. The Prusa is like a sports car. You take stuff out, it's all compact in there. Like it's really easy to put things together the wrong way if you like lose interest in the task and wander away from it, because it can take like an hour to replace something. I get some jams on the Prusa that take it out of service for like long periods of time. So yes, I have been putting that off because the Prusa, while a very fine printer and having it work most of the time is great, I just haven't had the 2-hour period necessary to diagnose and potentially replace it. Yeah, I would rather just replace the whole print head. That's kind of the way I've gone with like most of my other printers. It's just not worth it to me to like fix like a $5 part when I can pay $30 to replace the entire print head. Yeah, no, this actually seems like a pretty a pretty widespread problem. After I updated the firmware in the last revision, I found that it happened all the time, and now I can't get through a single print without it happening. So thank you. This is one of the things I like about having people on the stream, is like a lot of you also print stuff or have some of the same problems. Question: can you add the Kali repository to an Ubuntu Linux? Yeah, you can, and I've done that. So like you just add it to the sources that it pulls from, but it can create conflicts, and it isn't always recommended. So I've done this before, and just weaponizing Ubuntu is fine until you start to get like package conflicts where like it tries to grab the same package from like an Ubuntu like source, but there's also a source for Kali, and then there's a conflict between the two. That's really the problem with that technique. But if you need to quickly weaponize Ubuntu, and you don't worry that it might slowly rot itself from the inside from dependency like conflicts, then you're good to go. There's other ways of doing this. Obviously, if you just import, like if you just have some of the same sources, but like import them in a different way. I've seen ways of doing this, but frankly, like I tend to just run Kali separately, but I understand the inclination there to just kind of do an all-in-one. And there are ways of doing it without causing package conflicts. It's just, it's just hard. Like using some of the built-in modules and using some of the built-in stuff might not be possible if you're going to try to do things that way. So You know, there's always a trade-off when it comes to optimizing the perfect Linux system. That's why I like my Ender. I'm a tinker. Yeah, and honestly, I got a great like direct drive system for my Ender that kind of made it a bit more reliable. And I do really enjoy doing the upgrades. I just hate having my prints fail. And sometimes I just get so mad at it, I have to walk away. The real bummer is my CR30. The CR30, or no, CR60? I think it's the 30. Let me see. Yes, this is my greatest regret. So I got one of these Creality CR30s, and I have never been able to slice things in a way that that works well. This thing has been sitting on a shelf, and it makes me really sad because it's such a cool printer, and its potential is really, really crazy. Like, you know, it can theoretically just print out infinitely. It just keeps making stuff. But the quality was so incredibly rough that this thing that I paid like $800 for, I really haven't used that much. So if anybody has this and has had great results with it, please let me know, because I haven't found like a good slicer for it. But then again, I also haven't, I try annually to use this thing, and I always find that it's still not supported by most slicers, because a lot of like Infinite Z's printers do not have great slicers. So yeah, I truly wish that they did a better job of rolling this out in terms of slicers and usability. But I do have one of these printers, and I think they're so cool. I just have never been able to make something that I feel is super great build quality with it. It's too bad. It's a really great idea. Let's see. So yeah, Kali did get some of the new tool. Oh yeah, Kali got some new tools added to it. So if you're looking for those, then you know, Kali Linux, the most recent version, has a bunch of new ones, which is great. But yeah, trying to port things over to Ubuntu is a bit of a bummer sometimes. Like if it creates those. Use Arch rather than Ubuntu. We have an Arch user. How kind of you to identify yourself. Yes, you could certainly use Arch. And using something like Black Arch is definitely something that I would recommend if you like to announce yourself in casual conversations as a Arch user, as one does. So if you really want to do that, you can always use Black Arch. It has so many tools. It's just ridiculous. I find that like anytime I try using Black Arch, I'm just like stunned by the amount of stuff that they include in it by default. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe you don't want all that stuff. But I mean, frankly, like there's different levels that you can download. I tend to use Kali myself because it's a great standalone system that I can nuke if anything goes wrong. And generally, I don't save a lot of work in it. But if you're doing security research and you don't want to have to go back and forth between Linux distros and you just want things to work, then I absolutely understand why weaponizing Ubuntu is something that a lot of people do want to do, because it just works with most stuff. And it has a lot of great built-in things that make it more usable as a home lab. So yeah, weaponizing Ubuntu is something I do all of the time, but I typically install dependencies like directly, and I have found that I get mixed results with just trying to import all of like Kali's repos. Oh yes, and we've also got some Temple OS users, which is not Linux, by the way. I saw like a Linux roundup where like Temple OS was included, and I was like, nope. All right, so that's just about all the time that we have for today. If you had a question that wasn't answered, if you have some thoughts on Toorcamp, if you have also anything that you want to contribute to the next stream, like if you have a subject you want to talk about, I know we had a lot of questions about WPA3 on microcontrollers. So maybe I can create a little demo of creating a WPA3 network and joining it and just kind of showing how easy that is. I'm going to take a look on CircuitPython because that's the language I use most often, and see how simple it is to actually make a WPA3 network, because currently my new Linux computer that I just got off of eBay is not able to compile for Arduino, which is so much fun. So anyway, we'll probably have some more updates, but I will check the comments and make sure that we start addressing them. I know we went through a lot this time because, yeah, they've been stacking for a while. But I do read all the comments that you leave on the Security Forward YouTube channel, and I do appreciate them. They are often very funny. So if you want to support the stream, you can go to varonis.com/Kody, that's Kody, and it lets everyone here know that you appreciate the stream, you like us going live twice a week, and you want to see the stream continue. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does let them know that you like going live with us. So thank you to the 108 people that were live with us on the stream today. You can catch me again on Friday, where we go through all the hacking tools and news of the week. And I'm going to be bringing back the incident of the month. We're going to be having a guest from the Varonis Threat Labs back on the stream. They always have really interesting questions, and it might be Joe or it might actually be someone new. I'm not really sure yet. So if you like that that thing that we've been doing once a month, then let me know, because we might also be doing a tool of the month. And I'd really like to have them come on and maybe teach some tricks with Burp Suite or some other tools that they use to do the security research that they present about all the time. So yeah, it's OpenSUSE. Yes. Good morning. Where are you that it's the morning? Anyway, so it is the afternoon here, and I am now out of time for the stream. Yeah, good night. I think would be more accurate. But I'll see everybody on the Friday stream, and until then, have a good week, everyone. Goodbye.